Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to LunchBytes. This is the first episode of season 3. And if this is the first time that you're watching a LunchBytes episode and wondering what it is, well, we're a fortnightly tech live stream trying to bring the best technical content from the world of Azure. We're a UK-based team at Microsoft, and we like to bring people from within Microsoft or some of the partners that we work with onto the show to really talk and present about their technology passion within Azure. So we've got a great session planned up for you guys today. But firstly, as it's a live stream, we'd like everyone to follow our code of conduct. So this is really is being aware of others, being welcoming and respectful, be understanding of people's differences, be friendly and patient, be open to all questions and viewpoints, and be kind and considerate to others. And if you'd like the full code of conduct, then you can visit aka.ms/eventscoc. Also, on an accessibility point of view, closed captions are available on demand as well. Now, I'm Tyke Brennan. I'm a cloud solution architect in the UK and one of the hosts of LunchBytes, and I'm joined today by Stephen.
Hi everyone, I'm Stephen Adams. I'm also a cloud solution architect, helping organizations solve their challenges, but in the data and AI space.
Awesome. And usually we have Annika joining us as well, but she's not able to join today's session. Now, speaking of today's session, and Simon, I'm just bringing you up on the screen now. We've got yourself talking to us about Azure Arc-enabled data services. I'm really excited for this, but do you want to first give an introduction about yourself?
Yep, I'm Simon Reason. I'm a cloud solution architect working at Microsoft in the data and AI team. So my main area of specialization is SQL Server, all things SQL Server and relational databases on-prem and in the cloud. So my interest in Arc is primarily around the data services, which links into SQL Server.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for joining us on today's episode. And obviously, as today's also a live stream, we want people to be able to ask questions. So for anyone watching live, if you do have any questions that come to mind, please feel free to put them into the chat and we'll make sure we get to them in the Q&A section at the end. So Simon, really looking forward to this. We're going to hand over to you. The controls all yours.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Thank you. I'm here today to talk about Azure Arc-enabled data services for SQL Server. So we've previously talked about Arc. An Arc in this situation is going to form the bridge between your on-prem SQL Server estate and your Azure management in the portal. So I'll just take you through some of the slides. Now, what you'll notice is a few of these slides have got bridges in. I live in Edinburgh. Forth Rail Bridge is the first one. There's a few other bridges in there just to keep the theme going of what Arc is doing for us today. So what I'm going to talk about briefly is the overview of what Arc is, what it can do for you in this situation for SQL Server and data services. Then I'll talk you through some of the features of Arc, some of the things you can see, some of the benefits, and then we'll talk through some use cases. So this is going to ask, answer the question, why should I use Arc? What's in it for me for SQL Server and data services? Then we'll have a quick demonstration of how to onboard SQL Server instances into Arc, and then we'll have a question and answer session at the end if anyone has any questions. Okay, so what is Azure Arc? Arc is this overall view that allows you to manage Azure on-prem multi-cloud resources using a common control plane within Azure. So what this means is if you have on-premise resources, if you have Amazon, GCP, multi-cloud solutions, and you're having trouble figuring out, how to manage all that in one place, then Arc can do that. It can take your on-prem and all those other cloud solutions, bring them all into a single pane of glass within Azure and manage them, look after them, manage patching, managing updates, get reports on the versions and the status of your services. I'm focusing on Azure Arc-enabled data services here because that's the bit of it that's my focus. And we can talk about how you can manage your SQL Server estate through the Arc management portal. So just to drill into that a little bit further, the idea here is that if you've got SQL Server on-premise estate, for example, lots of instances of SQL Server running, and you have you can't migrate to the cloud for some reason. So, for example, you might not have the resources. You might have systems which are legacy systems that won't work well within the cloud, or it might be that you have data protection issues where you don't want to share your data into the cloud. What you can do is you can still manage that data estate using Arc-enabled data services. So what Arc will do is it will present to you a single pane of control for your estate in Azure, and I'll show you that later, and we'll talk about that. It also gives you additional benefits and flexibility. So, for example, one of the things that we have is we're seeing end of life for SQL Server 2012 and Windows Server 2012. If you need to maintain your security updates, your extended security updates, the ESU, then you get extra flexibility on how you can pay for those updates if your servers and your SQL Server instances are onboarded into Arc. You can, in fact, pay for them monthly now rather than paying one lump sum every 12 months. In addition to that, within Arc, you can manage patching, you can manage the security updates. So you can do things like schedule when the patches will occur, and you can see how they're progressing. You can also manage database configuration. So you can look at things like the performance and the temp disk usage and things like that of your databases. Rather than having to individually inspect them, you can have a single pane of glass on all of that information. Another thing that you can do with Azure Arc for data services is that you can also look at things like vulnerability analysis, best practice reports for your SQL Server, so you can see if there's any issues, any vulnerabilities, or any performance issues with your servers, and you can look at reports that do that. You also can onboard it onto Defender, so you can make use of all of the protections and benefits of Defender. And if your SQL Server is onboarded into Defender, then you get a more favorable pricing model, so you can get some cost savings from that. If your SQL Server is onboarded into Azure Arc, then you also can plug it into Purview, so you can manage data governance of your data estate and join everything up. So the great thing about Arc is it's that bridge between the on-premise or your hybrid cloud into your Azure subscription, into your Azure estate, and it brings it all together. So it basically gives you the idea that in terms of managing it, it's as if they're already all on Azure. It all comes together for you. So very briefly, how does it work? What do we do? How does it go? So there's two elements to onboarding a SQL Server instance into Arc. Firstly, what you do is you onboard the Arc-enabled server itself, Windows Server. So that's a very simple process. Once you've onboarded the server, you can then onboard the SQL Server instance. So this corresponds to our steps 1 and 2 in the diagram here. If we want to onboard SQL Server instances, we can actually automatically onboard the Windows Server as part of that process. And then once you've done that, you can do things like enroll into Microsoft Defender, as we've talked about. We can enable the best practice assessment, and we can also manage and look at configurations and all the patching and updates. The way it works is basically that you have your on-premise estate, and you install a service onto each server that then allows it to communicate with Azure, with the Arc services in Azure. This service, the core Arc service, is free, so there's no cost to it. And it's a very simple process. It can either be managed, it can be performed one server at a time, or there is ways that we can do it by applying policies, which would allow us to onboard at scale if you have a large estate. Okay. So just talk now I'm going to just talk through some of those features that I've alluded to, some of the things that we can get out of it, which might make it worthwhile for you, and additional functions that you can take advantage of within the Arc-enabled data services. So the first thing, the big thing, is the management from the Azure portal. So things you can do here is, for example, we can get an inventory of all of your end of service servers. Again, 2012 is quite a relevant use case right now, because things are coming to an end right now. So this allows you to identify which servers are running older versions of Windows or running older versions of SQL Server, and then that allows you to take action to bring them into the extended security updates, or you could, for example, modernize, upgrade those servers if you need to. When the machines are onboarded into Arc, that then allows us to use Azure policies to apply rules to those servers at scale. So for very large server estates, this allows us to manage those, even if they're on premise. We've got that bulk method of looking after them if we need to, and reducing your admin workloads and all of the management that entails. Other things we can do, as we've talked about, you can look at the database properties, you can dig into them individually, or you can run reports that look at them at scale. Another thing here is we could look at which servers are not on the latest cumulative updates. So again, this is all about versions, reporting, and all these things. We can build dashboards and reports that tells us a lot of this information if the servers are onboarded into Arc. So the inventory management is part of that, and the asset management. So this is how we talk about the extended security updates. Moving on. So this is one of the things you can do. So what I'll demonstrate this shortly is you can automatically onboard your SQL Server instances on premise into Arc. So in the portal, we've got a new feature in there, which you just click on it, and then it specifies the resource group and where you want to put it, and also the licensing, and then that applies that policy at scale. And you can manage that policy like any other policies. You can create exclusions to the policies, and you can switch it off, whatever you want there, once that policy has been created. The key element of this is, as I'll show you shortly, is that this what we need to do is specify that the license we're onboarding is with software assurance, because that allows you to access all of the features of Azure Arc. Another feature we've got is the best practice assessment. So for SQL Server, we can set this up, and it uses a log analytics workspace to write the data to, and we can then run queries on that, and we can also run this best practice report, which then tells us things like security, compliance, availability, and business continuity, all of the things we have here. So you can then see if there's any significant issues with your SQL Server instance, and then it allows you to take action. Again, I'll demonstrate that in a minute. You'll be able to see how that works, and also the fact it shows you remedial action. So again, it's all about managing it in one place, making life easy for you, and reducing the admin workload on your estate. This is one of the cost benefits with Azure. Azure Arc-enabled data services. If you onboard servers into Microsoft Defender, normally the Microsoft Defender is charged per core per month. So this bottom one here is the cost per core per month. But with Azure, it charges you on the servers per instance per month. So for example, if you had a server with a large number of cores, with a low number of instances, you would get a significant cost saving on your Defender subscription for that instance. We also have a cloud billing model. So another interesting thing we can do is if you're running a version of SQL Server on premise, what we can do is we can actually now, if that server is onboarded into Arc, we can actually treat it like as a pay-as-you-go instance within Azure. So if you spun up an instance, rather than having to pay upfront for a full enterprise or standard edition license, with this pricing model, you only have to pay for the services that you actually use. So if you're spinning up instances and running them down, this can give you extra flexibility, just as it does within Azure itself. Okay, so very briefly, I'm going to talk about some use cases. So we've kind of covered this in the general chat I've talked about already, but I'll just dig into it in a bit more detail. So these are some of the main use cases. So for example, as we've talked about, if you have a large SQL Server estate and if you're in the process of migrating into Azure, or you are halfway through it, or you've done as much as you can and you've ended up with a hybrid solution where some of your estate is still in a data center and some of it is in Azure, then you can enable Arc, and then you've still got that one place in Azure where you can manage your estate and look after your servers. This also allows you to address the issues of things like the security updates and link it all into Azure, so that you, without having to move over to Azure, you still get a lot of the benefits of the flexibility of Azure. Operationally, we've also talked about that. We have the single pane of glass. We can manage your on-prem estate as if it's in Azure, and it's multi-cloud or hybrid, on-prem, GCP, AWS. Other things, quite a common use case we encounter is where people have compliance issues, where they need to keep that data locally in a physical data center. So those are situations where Arc is fantastic, because what Arc is doing is it's just sending across the management information, the performance information on your machines. There's no customer data, no held data, nothing at all, except for the performance data is sent across. And also this means that it's quite a light load on your servers, because it makes use of the information that's already been there, and it's a very low amount of information we need to move around. And finally, cost benefit, which we've also touched on. So the Arc-enabled data service itself is free. You also get those flexible billing options that we've talked about for on-premise pay-as-you-go, flexible billing for the ESU, the monthly billing for the ESU updates, and the favorable pricing on Defender. Okay, so that covers a very quick introduction into Arc-enabled data services. I think the key takeaway is that this is a way of managing your estate in one place. It's very flexible because it allows you to go into different cloud solutions, cloud platforms to manage it, and you can. Every day we're building more and more features into it, and we're getting more and more benefits from it when we do it. So what I'm going to do now is take you through a demonstration, thank you, of just how we would onboard a SQL Server instance into Azure Arc. The first thing I will do is take you through the demonstration. Apologies. The first thing I'll do is take you through what the portal looks like, some of the features on the portal, and then we'll actually run through the physical process of onboarding into Arc. So what we have here is just a normal Azure portal, and you can either search for it here, or you can just click on it and it will take you into the Arc area. So what I've done for the purposes of this demonstration is I've created a virtual on-premise setup. So what we have is we've got a box running virtual machines, which makes it appear as if it's an on-prem solution, because they're not directly in Azure Arc. We've got 3 Windows servers and we've got 3 SQL servers running as if they're on premise. And what I've done is I've already onboarded one of these servers into Arc, and then I will take you through the process for onboarding an individual one, and then I'll take you through the process of onboarding at scale. But first, I'll just talk you through some of the features we have here. So this view here, this shows us the servers and the database instances we've already onboarded. There's various management features here. So for example, here's extended security updates we can have an overview of. We can also, looking down here, this is where we just focus on the machines themselves. These bits here are for Azure-based Arc solutions, and we're focusing on the on-premise part of Arc today. So if I drill down into this machine, what we have here is various things that we can do to manage and look after that machine. So, for example, we can choose to connect. We can run admin. You also have the Defender features and plugins. So this will come up and show you recommendations on what you need to do to make your services as safe as possible. We also can look at extensions, which are services that are running. This tells us information about the properties of the machine, and just other things that are interesting. Here we have policies. So again, this is one of the things we can do to manage policies at scale. We can also, because it's a SQL Server, this is where we would manage once it's been onboarded into Arc, this is where we could change the license type if we want to. I'll speak about that in a bit, and where we can manage things like the extended security updates. So if you subscribe to this then creates, then allows you to get the monthly payment for the extended security updates. We also have patching, so we can configure and manage patching. So here we can set schedules for patching, manage them as you would normally expect. So these are some of the features that we can manage from Arc. So this allows us to give a view of updates and critical updates for our servers here. So that gives you a high-level view of some of the things we can do to manage it. What we also have is, if we go into here, into our SQL Server instance, we also have best practice assessment here. So once you've onboarded your servers, this is the feature where you can have a look at the assessment. So what you can do with this is you can either manually run it, or you can set up a scheduled time for it to be run every week or every day. So if I just click that, that will go off and run a best practice assessment. If I click here, here's one I did earlier. And this shows us recommendations and issues on it on our server instance. And what we can do is we can click on this information, and it'll give us a description of what the problem was and actions we can take to remedy it. So that's very briefly some of the features that we can make use of in Azure Arc within the Azure Arc portal. So what I'm going to do now is take you through onboarding an individual SQL Server instance into Arc. We've got 3 instances, so I've already onboarded instance number 1. So now I'm going to onboard instance number 2 individually, and then what I will do is I'll set it up so I can do an at scale onboarding of them, which will cover the 3rd instance, instance 3. So to do that, what we do is we go to the Azure Arc portal. If we look at overview, we get these options to onboard services into Arc. So the one we want to go to here is Azure Infrastructure for free. And then we can pick SQL Server. And then what we do is we do connect SQL Server to Azure Arc. And this basically gives you a list of the criteria, the checklist to make sure you've got everything you need before you run through the process. So this is very simple. I'm just going to identify a resource group. And then this is all filled out for me automatically. You don't need to enter the server name on the proxy server. What you do need to do is enter the license type. So the top one there will, if you set that, you will be charged because that's the pay-as-you-go payment model. This one in the middle is for if you've got software assurance. So if you already paid for your license, we're not going to charge you again. What this is, this identifies the fact that you've already got the license. This is free, for this service. So, but this allows you to connect to the full features of the Arc-enabled data services. If you have other licenses, so for example, evaluation developer, this sort of thing, then you can select this one. Again, this is free, but this won't unlock all of the full suite of the Azure Arc data services. What you can also do here is, for example, exclude instances on your server. So if there's specific ones you don't want to onboard, you can do that here as well. And then we go through the usual resource tags. So let's say demo. And then what we get here is we get a PowerShell script. So this is a custom PowerShell script which we will run manually on our server. So I'm going to copy that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my remote desktop, which is my running my 3 machines, and I'm going to then remote desktop into the machine that we want to onboard. So this is SQL02, and I've already opened up the PowerShell window. So if I paste my script in here, this is the script generated, and all we do is we run that. When we run that, it will ask us to log in to our Azure subscription, and then it will automatically onboard both the server itself and SQL Server into Azure Arc. So if we just wait, there we go. So I just need to go to this page. And then you just provide the ID, the code. And then I just need to log in to my Azure account. There we go. So if we now close that window and go back, you'll see that it's successfully authenticated and it's now running through the process. Now this process is going to take a few minutes. So what I can show you is what the process looks like when it's finished. So here we can see this is the one I did earlier. So it runs through, it installs the agent. It then detects that it's not been found and it registers the resource with Arc and installs the Azure extension. So once we've got the server, we get the SQL Server instance, and then it completes. So that's what you'll see. And this will take 5 or 10 minutes to run. So I don't want to wait for it right now. But at the end of that process, you will then see your server and your SQL Server onboarded. So we've got the server. It's now running through onboarding the SQL Server instance as well. So that's all there is to onboarding it one at a time. There's an additional feature we can make use of, which is SQL Server automatic Arc-enabled server registration. So what this does is this allows us to create a policy and a remediation for the policy, which detects all of the SQL Server instances you have which have not already been onboarded into Arc. So And if you create this policy and leave it active, it means that if you add additional SQL Server instances to your estate on-prem, they will automatically get added into Arc. And you can modify the policy to exclude, server-specific names, just as you can modify any other policy once it's been created. So I'll just take you through how we do that. So you can see this window here looks very similar to the one for the individual onboarding. So I'll pick my resource group. I will set my license in exactly the same way as before, and I click enable. And as you can see, this goes away and it creates a policy, and it goes away. Now, this takes a while to work through all of the policy and all the onboarding. So we'll leave that to do it, but that will then onboard make sure that all of our servers and SQL Server instances are automatically onboarded into Arc. Okay. So that covers how we onboard. There's one other thing that I just wanted to touch on very briefly is some of the reporting features. So once you've got your servers onboarded into Arc, it's very easy to access reporting features to actually use, to actually see what you've got. So what we have here is we have something called Azure Resource Graph Explorer, which allows us to access the resource data for these onboarded servers, and then we can create dashboards and reports so you can monitor the health, versions, status, all that sort of thing. So I've got a very simple query here that just gives us a list by version. And if we run that query, what we'll see, hopefully, at the moment, there's only one SQL Server there. But what we can do is we can actually, with that, we can create a chart. So here's our chart. It's not very impressive at the moment. But in addition to that, we can then add this to a dashboard. So we can create a dashboard. Let's create a new dashboard. And we pin that to the dashboard. So that means now every time we go and look at that dashboard, that will automatically update with the current information. And you can use this to explore resources, server versions, all this sort of thing. So you can see here, this one is pulling out our SQL Server version. So if we go to our shared dashboard, hopefully it's done it. Or it's still thinking about it. But that will then appear as a shared dashboard in here. There we go. And there's our, it's already picked up the fact we've got now 2019. That's our second instance onboarded into it. So you can see the dashboard's updating in real time, and also that our onboarding process is working for our SQL Server. Let's have a look here. There we go. So we can see the SQL 02 one is done. So that concludes my presentation. So I'll hand back to Stephen and Ty.
Great, thanks, Simon. I definitely learned quite a bit through that. So we've had quite a few questions in the chat. So starting off with Andrew, we've got afternoon. I'm looking at Arc to cover server upgrades and move to Defender. Any tips?
Yeah. So the thing that the Arc is really good for is understanding what you've got and what upgrades you need to do. You can't use Arc itself to do an upgrade per se, but you can still report on it and manage it, and it gives you that view of what versions, what upgrades you need. So not only does it cover your upgrades, but it covers things like the updates and the patching as well. So I would say get things into Arc through the process we've talked about there, and once it's in there, you'll then have a much stronger view of the scope of the challenge you've got to upgrade. Great.
And then next question, we've got, does Arc enable data services incur any additional charges?
So Arc itself, the data services itself is free, because the servers that you're onboarding, they exist on-prem. They're not being moved, migrated, or copied, and you've already paid for the licenses for them. So the service itself is free. But if you use any of the additional features, so for example, the best practice report, Defender, all these additional services, they do come with standard charges. For the best practice report, we have to use a log analytics workspace. That's quite a very small charge. But obviously with Defender and other things, as we've talked about, ESU updates, they all come with standard charges. But if you just focus on the Arc, that is a free service.
Great. And then lastly, we've got either large on-premises SQL Server estate. Does Microsoft offer any assistance getting that estate onboarded into Arc?
Yeah, so we offer a free service for large SQL estates to get you onboarded into Arc. So we have a migration team that can help you with that. So if you have a large number of instances of SQL Server, contact your specialist or your account manager, and they will help nominate you for the migration team. And this is a fully free service. So we'll support you in that to get you moved into it.
Great. Thanks, Simon.
Simon, I had a question as well. Obviously, you showed us the reporting dashboard and we had the number of SQL instances. Is there anything else that you would typically recommend people put within that reporting dashboard? Any other information from using that connectivity with Arc?
Yes, there's loads and loads of things. That was we're scratching the surface there. So another thing is we can look at things like patching status. We can look at versions. So we had the SQL Server versions, but you can look at Windows Server versions as well. You can also get performance statistics from it as well. So you can see if servers are overloaded or if they're struggling or running out of memory, things like that. You can get all of that information into the dashboard as well. So you have a great deal of information and a great deal of control on how you report on it.
Awesome. If I'm wanting to go and learn a bit more about this, where should I go?
So there's lots of resources on Microsoft Learn. Thank you. So we've got some resources here, which we will share the links for. So we have that. Most of what I've talked about is heavily linked into these. So we have the top one is the overview of the Arc-enabled SQL Server. The second one is announcements about the capabilities of Azure Arc, particularly with the hybrid cloud. And the third one is in some more information, some more detailed technical information about how you would secure your SQL Server estate with Azure Arc. And finally, the last one is probably at the most deeply technical level. It's a description of the actual installed agent that manages that communication to the Azure Arc portal. So if you want to know, if you're concerned that it might be using up too many resources or anything else, that will give you a big detailed explanation of how it works. And what a lot of customers do is that they do a proof of concept. So they maybe put Azure on a couple of machines, monitor its performance, and once they're happy that it's not impacting any operational systems, then they would look at onboarding at scale.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Simon, for the session, for going through that demo. I've certainly learned a lot as well. Brilliant. Thanks for having me on, and we're going to continue through the last bit of the session.
Thank you.
Okay, so obviously LunchBytes is a 2-week show. So in 2 weeks' time, we're actually going to be talking about Cosmos DB. So thank you once again for joining us. If there are any other questions that you have, please feel free to put them into the YouTube chat, into the channel, and we'll try and get back to you on those. And another thing, if you actually liked the content today, if you want to see more content from LunchBytes, then go ahead and visit aka.ms/LunchBytes to see a full playlist. We've got 27 other episodes for you to go and watch. Ranging from things like on the Kubernetes side of things to logic apps and integration, as well as a previous session that we've done around Arc-enabled app services. So if you're interested in any of those, please feel free to go and look at some of the content that we already have. Any last words, Stephen?
No from me. We'll see everyone in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks a lot, everyone. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone.